Okay, so the question is, what do we do when we take the square root of a number? So as an example, if you take the square root of 36, the factors for this are positive 6 and positive 6. Technically, the factors for this are negative 6 and negative 6, but by definition here, we do not include negatives, because if we do include negatives, graphically this would not be a function. Graphically, this would not be a function. So this becomes just normal 6, right? The question is, what do we do if we take the square root of negative 36 and we're asking to find the root of this? So technically we could divide this into negative 1 times 6 times 6. We could go ahead and factor out the 6, and we're left with negative 1 in the inside. So there was someone, a mathematician, who wanted to figure out what the square root of negative 1 is, and so they created a number which is called I, okay? Which is called an imaginary number. It actually has usage in electricity and voltage to describe voltage and electricity, so it's interesting because it's actually not imaginary, it's actually describing a real thing. So what I want you to know is that if you ever have a negative, then the square root of a negative is actually equal to the square root of I times I. So what we just learned is that I times I is actually equal to negative 1. So in this case, this would be, the answer for this would be 6i. So the square root of negative 36 is equal to 6i. Okay? So this is actually the next part that we're going to cover next week on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Wednesday will primarily be review, and Monday and Tuesday we'll talk about the rules of imaginary numbers. Your test is going to be in 2 weeks on Monday. So tomorrow we're going to cover completing the square. We might cover a little bit about imaginary numbers, and then we will try to finish the chapter by Tuesday, review on Wednesday. Your test will be on Monday. Okay? Monday in 2 weeks. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a problem together. So let's just say we have x squared plus 2x plus 4 is equal to 0. Okay. So here we could just go ahead and say a is equal to 1, b is equal to 2, c is equal to 4. Okay, in this case, we would go ahead and use the quadratic formula. We'd go x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. You can go ahead and start filling it out. Negative 2 plus or minus the square root b squared is 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times 4 divided by 2 times 1 equals negative 2 plus or minus the square root 4 minus 16 divided by 2, and we get negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 12 divided by 2. Question? Oh. All right, sorry, this should be negative 12. Okay, so the next thing we would do is we would try to factor out 12. We know that it's not a perfect square, so we can't just get rid of it. So it would be negative 2 plus or minus the square root of, I would say, 2 times 2, which is 4, times 3 times I divided by 2. And again, if you know this already, you don't need to write this. I'm just trying to show you what the factors are. You can skip this step if you want. So there's a factor here. You can take out one of the 2's. There's an I. You can take out one of the i's. So this equals negative 2 plus or minus 2I times the square root of 3 over 2. Sorry, let's scoot this down. Okay, so we're almost done. The only last thing that we have here is that negative 2 and 2I are both divisible by 2. So we can go ahead and change this. So this would be equal to negative 1 plus or minus I times the square root of 3. Oops. So the reason is that 2 goes into both negative 2 and 2 goes into 2I times the square root of 3. So your answer would be x is equal to negative 1 plus or minus I times the square root of 3. Okay, and that would be your answer. Your answer is two things. Your first answer is x is equal to negative 1 plus I times the square root of 3. And your second answer is x is equal to negative I, or negative 1 minus I square root 3. And so next week we'll talk about how do we graph this, how do we multiply this, and what things do we remember. Okay. Any questions? Okay.